Welcome to Behind the Scenes at the Hanover Theater from News and Talk Radio WCRN. To join the conversation, call 508-438-0965. Now, here's your hosts, Lisa and Troy.
Or, in fact, it's just Troy right now. Lisa's still on her way from the theater. The way these evening broadcasts are conceived, they were an attempt to try to connect with our audiences a little more closely. Tonight at the theater, at the Hanover Theater, just a few blocks away from the studio here, we've got our opening night performance of West Side Story, the classic musical by Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim. And that audience has got little inserts in their programs that encourage them to tune in to 8:30 a.m. here on their way home and to give a call in at 508-438-0965. All those who were not at that show tonight, first of all, come to the theater over the weekend here. You've got 4 more performances, but I encourage you to call in as well, 508-438-0965. We're talking tonight about West Side Story, the classic American musical that changed the face of American musical theater. Its story is a classic one. It's based, I suppose, loosely on Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare's classic. It was set in the 50s and 60s of the 50s and 60s streets of the Upper West Side neighborhood in New York, the area that was cleared in the name of urban renewal in the 1960s for what now has become Lincoln Center. Ironically, the production at the Hanover Theater tonight is a tour based on the Lincoln Center Theater revival of West Side Story from 2009, I believe. And phenomenal revival. The production itself is phenomenal, but the piece, the musical West Side Story is classic and has no peer, I would say. It really got Stephen Sondheim started on Broadway. It was his first major Broadway credit and his first Tony Award. The musical itself didn't win the Tony Award. It was up against The Music Man for Best Musical of that year, but it should have. I think it clearly was groundbreaking. This production of it, I just came from the theater tonight myself and saw much of the production, not the whole thing, but much of it, and found that it is every bit of what I expected it to be. The Lincoln Center production in this revival put some of the original Spanish language back into they really got the grit. They got the grit that is integral to the story and needed to be there, and just it makes it poignant. It just makes it real. It's not glitzed over. It's not glitz and glamour. You know, people talk about musical theater, the Rodgers and Hammerstein-esque. Oklahoma, we sing our way through the plot. West Side Story is highly stylized dance, original choreography by Jerome Robbins. And the Sharks and the Jets, that classic dance sequence that opens the musical and opens the movie, which he also choreographed, and many of you have probably seen the movie of West Side Story. Just the tension between the gangs, between the working class Polish and the Puerto Rican gangs, the Sharks and the Jets. This production of West Side Story began, as I said, at Lincoln Center Theater in 2009. It ran in New York for a couple of years, and then and now has been out on tour. And this tour in specific did play Boston and is now playing Worcester. It's here for this full weekend, here for tonight, Friday, 2 shows, Saturday, 2 shows, Sunday, and we're close to sold out for all performances. I think this is just a classic. How could it be otherwise? If you're listening and you have anything you'd like to say about West Side Story or your experiences at the Hanover Theater or your experiences with this classic piece, give us a call, 508-438-0965. Again, that's 508-438-0965. We have 2 members of the cast of tonight's production who are going to join us here shortly, and my co-host Lisa is at the theater right now, and when the curtain comes down, they're going to hop in the car with her and pull around the corner here and jump in and join me in the studio, and they can answer some questions and talk about their experiences being on tour with this classic. That's a life, honestly, being on tour with theater, and it's this is a good show for it. It's a young cast. It's the gangs were young people, and most of the cast members are young, as the characters they're playing are young, and boy, you got to be young. I don't know, to be able to pull that off, to live in a bus for weeks at a time and just go from one city to another, 1 week to the next. You know, there was a lot of, and I was looking back in preparation for talking with you tonight. I was looking at some of the history and refreshing my memory of the history of the West Side Story. The Stephen Sondheim, we think of as a composer, lyricist, began as a lyricist here, working with Leonard Bernstein. So Bernstein composed both this musical, West Side Story, and Candide at the same time, and then there are actually pieces which were written for Candide, which ended up in West Side Story. Tony and Maria's duet, One Hand, One Heart, originally was written for Candide, and similarly, G. Officer Krupke was originally written for Candide. It's fascinating, I think, to go back and read the interviews with him. Hal Prince created the production on Broadway. He directed the first production of the show in New York, and many said that it was impossible. It's too much dance, too much to accomplish. You can never pull it off. You can never do all that. The producers agreed that they would double the rehearsal period. Shows in New York typically rehearsed at that time for 4 weeks. I think still actually for 4 weeks. They did an 8-week dance rehearsal period instead of the customary 4 for West Side Story, because there was more dance in West Side Story than in any previous Broadway show. So Hal Prince was able to get Jerome Robbins to commit to choreographing. Originally they wanted James Dean for the lead role, but he actually died before hearing of it. They did find Larry Kert and Cheetah Rivera, and then a cast, and the rest is history, I guess you'd say. So it was an incredibly ambitious project when it was created, and it was groundbreaking. There are a lot of things that have come along since that would not be what they are, but for the ground that West Side Story broke for them. Musicals like Rent, where you really try to tackle difficult subjects. We have Les Miserables coming up at the Hanover Theater in April. And, it's interesting. I was working with a director in Connecticut about on a production of Les Miserables, and at an audience talkback session, he answered a question from an audience member saying, "It seems like there's so many dark subjects. It's such a dark musical," and he said, that musical theater is the only place that you can really explore dark subjects on stage today, because you won't get an audience to come see a dark play, at least not in the numbers that would enable that play to have a long run in New York and on tour and a long life as a piece of theater. But a musical, some of the greatest musicals of all time are dark, and it's because you can create such a power, such a wealth of emotion with music that it just takes the story to another level. We're at 8:30 a.m. right here on WCRN. We're at number 508-438-0965. If you'd like to call and to talk with us, call 508-438-0965. I'm Troy. I'm with the Hanover Theater, and I'm hosting us talking about West Side Story this hour, talking about the classic musical whose production opened here in Worcester just 2.5 hours ago, and the curtain came down on that opening night performance just moments ago. We do have a couple of cast members who are on their way to join us in a few minutes. I mentioned that the story was based loosely on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. There are a whole bunch of story parallels. I'm looking here at, I refresh my memory as to some of the things that are similarities between the two. Romeo and Juliet starts out with a street fight between the Montagues and the Capulets, and the Jets and the Sharks in West Side Story have a similar fight. It's of course the boy meets girl on opposite sides of the tracks. The Maria, or Juliet, is a daughter of a Puerto Rican family. Her brother is the head of the Sharks, the Puerto Rican gang. The West Side Story's Romeo, Tony, is a member of the Polish-American gang, the Sharks, and the Jets. The beginning. Let's see. Tony has a recurring dream in West Side Story, just like Romeo describes his dream to Mercutio in Shakespeare's play. Juliet is betrothed to Paris, and Maria has been set up with Chino. There's an arranged marriage in both. Some Montague men crash the Capulet party where Romeo meets Juliet in Shakespeare's play. In West Side Story, very much the same thing. Maria and Tony see each other from opposite sides of the gym, immediately attracted to each other. And then the classic balcony scene. Romeo searches for Juliet and finds her at her balcony. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? After the dance in West Side Story, Tony finds Maria and uses the fire escape, her balcony, there's something very different between Tuscany and the mid 50s and 60s streets in New York in the 1950s, but the story is so timeless that you could put it in any time period, I think, with any cast of characters. Both stories feature a false death, Juliet's / Maria's false death, and Tony's / Romeo's suicidal response to his mistaken belief that his love is dead. It is a Romeo and Juliet created by Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim, set in a very contemporary, very a potboiler of a society. That time in New York City, street gangs were the way that you held your ground, the way that you felt like you were a part of something, the way that you had a family, and indeed it is against that backdrop that this classic love story was set. Give us a call, 508-438-0965. If you saw the show tonight, then call us and talk about it, 508-438-0965. We are down here at the WCRN studios. We have broken in, and I'm sitting in Hank Stoltz's chair right now, and I'm hoping that nobody from the studio is listening, or we will likely be in trouble. But again, I'm Troy from the Hanover Theater. We are premiered Worcester's production of the West Side Story. The national tour stopped at the Hanover Theater tonight for its grand opening. We have more performances running throughout the weekend. This show, is an experiment we're trying this year to try to connect a little more closely with our audiences, to say, hey, what did you think of the show? How was your experience with the theater? And talk about it. What did it mean to you? What struck you about the show? What do you like? I think we've got a caller right now. We'll bring on. Hi, thanks for calling.
Hi, this is Eddie from Fresno. What a great show.
Eddie from Fresno.
Yeah. Fabulous show.
I suspect that this is actually Eddie from West Boylston. Eddie, who's one of the two founders of the Hanover Theater. Yeah. So
it amazes me, Troy. You looked around. It looked like to me it was a sellout tonight.
Yes, very close.
And what a show. I mean, Broadway and Worcester.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched the first act, and then part of the second act, and then I came over here. But how did it end like it's supposed to end?
It did. Very sad, but it was a great show. Standing ovation right away. Everybody had just a great time. My nephew is sitting here with me, Michael, and said it was the best of his favorite of all the shows that we've had over the last 5 years.
How old is he?
How old are you now? 35.
All right. Well, that says something. That's great. That's great. We've had a lot of great shows, so that says a lot, I think.
And a lot of young people here tonight, too, and I think that bodes well for the future.
Absolutely. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. I hear people talking about it as they left.
I'm going right by you now. I can see you.
All right, then. All right.
You're doing a good job.
Well, this is kind of a fun time here.
I'm going to put Janice on now, and she's going to tell you what she thinks.
Oh, dear. I don't know if we can hear from Janice. All right.
Hi.
All right. Hi, Janice. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, what did you think of the show?
Fabulous. I love the choreography. Jerome Robbins, it was magnificent. That's what I love the best.
Yeah, it's just it's gritty, isn't it? It's not whitewashed
Not
musical
sugar
theater
sweet,
choreography,
no.
sugar-coated. That's right. They really get the tension between the gangs and the whole bit. I agree with you. I think it's fantastic. It reminded me a little bit of part of what they did in Moving Out a few years ago. We had the Billy Joel tour, obviously very
I
different.
saw that too.
But sort of the same kind of tension in a lot of it. Well, thank
Have you seen the show?
I did. Well, tonight.
Oh, you were there tonight.
I was there tonight until almost the end when I had to dash over here.
I didn't know if you had seen it in Broadway or earlier at some other location. No, it was absolutely fabulous. I'm so happy for Worcester to have this venue that we can see so much. Thanks.
Me too. Thank you for coming tonight.
Bye-bye.
Bye. We need to take a short little break. We'll be right back with you.
WCRN. To join the conversation, call 508-438-0965. Once again, here's your hosts, Lisa and Troy.
And it actually is Lisa and Troy now. Lisa, the show's come down. Lisa's joined me here, and she's brought a member of the cast, Louis Napoleon, who's here joining us. Thanks for joining us.
Of course, my pleasure.
Before you say anything else, I want to encourage anybody who's listening to call in and talk about the show, 508-438-0965. Louis, give us a couple of minutes about your experience being on tour with this show. Have you done others, and how do you find West Side Story?
I have. This is actually my third national tour. I just finished up with 2 Years of Cats in May, and then I jumped right over to West Side. I've been on it for about 10 weeks now.
You are a dancer.
A dancer, yeah.
He is totally a dancer.
Yeah, it's been great so far. We've only been out for 10 weeks, but I'm actually a swing in the show, which is a fancy word for an understudy for the ensemble. I cover 11 of the guys on stage, both sharks and jets. I was actually on tonight as Federico, one of the bigger shark guys.
So do you get confused sometimes on which side you're on?
Sometimes. My cast is wonderful to me, and they help me out all the time.
Push you over to the right direction?
Yeah. Uh-huh, of course.
Well, you know what struck me as I was watching the show, which, by the way, was awesome,
Thank you.
The dancing is fabulous, and there are so many men in this production.
Yeah, it's actually all of Jerome Robbins' original choreography.
Oh, it's so fabulous. It's so sharp, and
Thank
the dancers are sharp. And so that was the first thing I said to you is, I can tell you're a classically trained dancer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this actual production was based on a 2009 Broadway revival that was directed by Arthur Lawrence. And then our director was his associate on Broadway, David Saint. And then Joey McNeely said all of our choreography, who danced in Jerome Robbins' Broadway back in the 80s.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we got it. We learned it right from the source.
We've got a caller who wants to talk, who wants to join the conversation. John, you're on with us.
Well, I got to say that it was one of the best performances in the 5 years that I've been going to the theater here.
Woo!
Thank you, John.
It was just absolutely dynamic. I'll tell you, Thaddeus Pearson, what a boon for us tonight to have him as the understudy playing Tony. As a singer here in the community, I was awestruck. The man had a great commanded voice. I've never heard better. It was absolutely tremendous, and it was here in Worcester.
Yeah, he's great, isn't he? He actually only had about 2 hours before the show when he knew he was going in, so he did it right off the cusp. He's really wonderful.
Wow.
Well, as I say, I know that he was trying his best to make sure that he was matching up to Maria, and but he just really did his job to match her, and I think the whole audience could feel it.
Oh, good. That's really nice to hear. Thank you.
All righty.
Thanks, John. Anything? Well, so what was anything about the show that struck you in particular, or your favorite piece, your favorite scene?
Well, we as a singer here locally in the Worcester community, we hear the one hand, one heart at many weddings. We do it a lot ourselves, but that's why I said it was just emotionally to hear it done so well. The orchestra was second to none. You could hear a pin drop in the theater. Everyone was, I think, taken by the great sound of it all.
Great to hear. Thank you. And thank you for calling and sharing it with us.
Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes we do a disservice to performers with understudy announcements. I think that you say you want the right performer to get credit for their performance. So you say, tonight the role of Tony will be played by.
Of course.
But I think that you give the audience an inherent impression that they're about to see somebody who's not as good, and that's very often not the case.
Very often not the case. Absolutely. You're
and
absolutely
so
correct.
I think we do ourselves a disservice
And from a
sometimes.
female perspective, I have to say I was halfway in love with Tony from the moment I saw him.
Oh,
Tall,
he'll
dark, and
appreciate
handsome.
that.
He was great.
Yeah, and one of the best things is, of course, that it's just so different for us on stage. I mean, it has nothing to do with being better or worse. It's just so much different, and it breathes a different life into the show, and it's really exciting to be up there. I'm sure it's exciting from an audience perspective to watch that as well.
Mm.
So how do you find Worcester's audience compared to, where'd you play last? Where were you last?
We were actually further up north for the blizzard that hit. We were in Burlington,
Further than
Vermont.
this?
Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, we went right after Christmas. We had 2 days up there, and it's a nice little town. We actually just got into Worcester. Am I saying that right? Worcester. Worcester.
There's no R. We're in Massachusetts.
Oh, I'll work on that. I'll write that on my hand or something. But it's good. We just got in just a little before we had to be at the theater because we have sort of an extended schedule on these first nights in theaters because we have to do sound checks and rehearsals and everything. But we have all day tomorrow, so hopefully we'll get around. Is there anywhere special we should be checking out?
You should skate right there on the oval.
Oh, okay. Very good. We'll have to do that.
I know you'll all be able to
Come
skate
see the
very
West
well.
the cast of West Side Story on the oval ice skating rink.
You can do a whole sharks and jets on ice choreography.
And if you like art, you should definitely check out the Worcester Art Museum. They have
Okay.
some world-class paintings.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you asked Lisa what you do in Worcester. You should be careful. She can go. She's the cheerleader for the city.
That's good. That's
but
great.
no, there's a lot going on. But what our audience? Was it a good audience tonight?
They were wonderful, yeah, and the house is gorgeous. It's always exciting because we get to play so many different houses, and it makes the show dynamic for us as well because it sounds a little different everywhere we are, and the audience reacts a little differently depending on where we are. And yeah, they were wonderful. They were top notch, and I'm pretty sure we were full up too.
Yeah, absolutely, up to the back rows. So we only have a couple minutes more here, but can you give us a picture of what it's like to be on the road with one of these shows?
It's always exciting. It's always exciting. There's always something happening. I'm the type of person that I always need a change in climate, a change in setting, and it definitely offers that. Yeah, it's a new city every day. You get to see the whole country. I've actually played every state besides Alaska. So
There's a
if
goal.
anybody wants to book me in a show in Alaska, I'm more than willing and ready. Yeah, so it's exciting, and it's exciting to get to meet all these different people and share the story that we're telling every night with them.
That's great. So is it a bus tour? Are you on a bus between?
We bus as well as
cities?
fly. Like right after here, we're actually flying down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then we get out of the cold after this.
All right.
Yeah.
So you'll close here on Sunday and open there on
We
Tuesday?
I think we got really, really lucky, and we have New Year's Eve and New Year's Day off.
All right.
So
Wednesday.
and then we open Wednesday for a couple shows down there.
All right. Are you doing a lot of 2 and 3 show stints, or is it mostly 5s and 8s?
We do a couple split weeks. We have a couple full weeks. We keep it fresh. We
mix
do
it
a
up.
couple
Mix it
one
up.
nights. Yeah, just whatever we can do. Whenever we can do the show, whoever we can do it for, we're there.
Well, we've got you in here in Worcester for only 5 shows, but if it had worked differently with the holidays period, we could have done more. We've got all 5 of these sold to the walls. So
Yeah,
it
we
would have been
would
nice
have loved to be
do
here
more.
longer, especially with the ice skating rink and everything, right?
That's right. There you go.
And they did get a standing O at the end of the performance, just want to say.
Oh, we did. That's
You
awesome.
did.
We can't. It's hard to see from the stage sometimes because the lights are blaring, but we definitely feel the energy. It's nice to know that as well.
Well, and just the ending of the show is so dramatic.
Yeah,
And
it's actually changed a little for this production as well. A lot of people might recognize that there's a processional at the end of the classic set production, which premiered in 1957 on Broadway. But in this production, it kind of sits there and it settles you with a picture, and it leaves the audience with a much grander picture, I think.
All right. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank
Really
you for having
grateful
me.
to have you over here. Nobody wanted to hear me sing "I Feel Pretty," which was going to be the next thing if you didn't come in. So, thanks for having, and thank you everyone for joining us.